Hi, everybody. Welcome to Happy Hour live on Brew Sports. We welcome you inside the studio for a Wednesday edition of the program. Sitting next to me on the show today, we've got Scott Wisniewski and Ryan Thies. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Welcome to Happy Hour. How's life today?
Pretty good. I mean, it's a little cold and rainy outside, but inside nice and dry, ready to talk some sports.
Absolutely. Scott, how's life for you today?
Well,
That's good. Good to hear. Of course, it is Happy Hour. We've got our favorite beverages. If you've got yours at home, we encourage you to join us and take a toast to the sports world as we roll along with the program. Of course, your comments are encouraged as well. Don't forget to hit that share button as well as we move along with the program. We love you tuning in, but also sharing what we've got going on today as well. A lot of great things to get to on the show today. We're going to be joined by Gregg Schwartz, one of our NFL correspondents, here in just a little while to break down the exciting news that Marshawn Lynch might be coming out of retirement officially for the Oakland, Las Vegas, whoever the heck they are, Raiders. We'll have to see how that plays into then the free agent market for Adrian Peterson, Jamal Charles, a lot of those different big players out there. But we'll talk to Gregg about that coming up in the second segment. First and foremost, though, the big story leading into the rest of the day, and of course then tomorrow as well, has to do with the 2017 Masters tournament down at Augusta, Georgia. Not exactly off to a roaring start, though, today, gentlemen. The par 3 contest and the practices have all just been shelved due to terrible weather down at Augusta. Winds up to almost 40 miles an hour and rain. It's just kind of atrocious. And you said this off the air, Scott. It kind of looks like the British Open out there right now with the terrible weather going on down in Georgia.
yeah, it's actually the British Open, my least favorite golf tournament, because the weather's always terrible and the grass is usually brown. But the Masters usually
it's this fine, pristine,
visually great to watch, and we'll see what this weekend brings with some of the weather they might have.
That's going to make a big challenge here for the participants here this week, something that they aren't used to at Augusta.
Well, that's what I'm wondering about, too, is, when the weather is completely fine and it's a level playing field, of course, usually then the best golfer wins. But when you throw in the elements of Mother Nature and the wind and the rain, I don't necessarily know if this really favors a particular golfer. It's not like certain, NFL teams that are used to playing like in the cold weather or the hot, and then all of a sudden they have to go to this other, the switch of that being like, oh, what are we going to do now? This is a level playing field still. I don't feel like we're going to see all of a sudden Rory McIlroy is not going to like shoot up and be like, well, I used to play in the rain all the time. It's a different sport like in golf that doesn't really happen. But assuming for the moment that the weather fairly cooperates, who are some of the people that we need to be keeping an eye on? You hear the big names all the time, but really, though, who are some of the guys to keep an eye on this year?
Well, right now, the big three, when you think of golf, you think of McIlroy, Dustin Johnson, and Jordan Spieth. Those are the three names that everybody talks about. I would expect two of those to be in the 4 or 5 that are leading at the top when we get into Sunday. One of them is going to have a rough round. I don't know which one, but that's just the way it always goes. Usually, if you take the 3 best golfers going into the Masters, one of them has a rough go at it, and 2 of them are usually in the mix at the end. So I expect 2 of those names at least to be there.
I could see Dustin Johnson being the one that is not there.
Oh.
He hasn't played Augusta very well in his career. He's done a phenomenal job here this 2017 season. He's got 3 wins already, and he's the favorite to win this one coming in this week. But he's only shot under 70 just a couple times in the 26 rounds that he has played at Augusta. And so he doesn't. It's not his course. Not like Jordan Spieth where he dominates. I think the weather, if it becomes a factor, benefits Jordan Spieth more than anything, because without the weather, Jordan Spieth knows how to dominate Augusta.
That's a good point. But, really, though, the guy that's really consistently struggled at the Masters recently has been Rory McIlroy. That's the one, major championship that has continued to evade him in his career. He's trying to win, and get into company with, with Nicklaus and Woods and Sarzen and Hogan and Player to have claimed all 4 of the major titles. And yet McIlroy, almost every year, for at least the last couple of years, every time he gets to the Masters, something never fully clicks. Is this the year that we finally see Rory finally break through and get over whatever mental hump is impeding him?
Well, you could, but the one thing to look at when you look at the Masters, 5 of the last 6 champions were 20-1 or higher odds to win it. So the recent history says, you're going to have your names fighting it out, and then there's going to be an unknown or a surprise.
There's always that unknown, yeah.
So the real trick is, who's that unknown going to be? And that's even harder to predict, because you can talk about guys who are at the top of their game, but who are some of those guys in that middle class or lower that are going to step up and have a great tournament?
And I think 2 of those names you can really pay attention to are John Ram and Hideki Matsuyama.
Yeah.
John Ram kind of put in a great – I think they're counting this one as his rookie year. He has had a couple top 6 finishes, even had a win in the second week of the season. Real young guy coming out of Arizona State. He's been playing very well. He has, like I said, finished in the top 6 and a couple times even finished second in the tournaments this year. So he's playing some hot golf. But Augusta is a different animal. Hideki Matsuyama, he's been consistent all throughout his
very
career.
Consistent.
He just needs to add that one signature major championship win to try and solidify his career, and I think this one could be the one.
Well, and you look at it, too, from the young perspective, and we've talked about Jordan Spieth a little bit already. He has consistently just been on fire every time he comes to Augusta. He's never finished lower than second place, which is not a bad record, honestly, when you really think about it. If he wins again this year, is it safe to say that he's one of the greatest to ever just play the Masters, or do you put him into the all-time category if you've already gotten such high success at such an early part of his career?
I think he's on the cusp of that, but you have to be careful to anoint people into that upper echelon, too.
Of course.
I think he's certainly making a case, and especially if he has a great tournament this weekend. But, I mean, there's a list of guys in golf that started out really good and ended up having good careers, but never became the Watsons and the Golden Bears and so we'll see. But I think he's certainly making a case, and he's the best guy I think on the tour that has a chance to do that.
Yeah, he knows Augusta, and he knows how to play really good golf when it matters. And as much as I don't want to see it, there's always that possibility of him kind of tapering off and kind of coming back to reality. As you kind of saw last year, he didn't have as many wins on the tour as he did the year before.
Right.
So you never know what's going to happen. And what I like about the Masters, it sets the tone for the rest of the year, how the players are going to come out to the other 3 majors. And so I'd like to see Jordan Spieth come out, but as you said, it's kind of a crapshoot when it comes to this tournament, because who knows? Like last year, no one predicted Danny Willett to win that.
You were talking about those, dark horses coming out of the woods, and it's so much more difficult, I feel like, with golf to predict who that surprise is going to be. Sometimes, like in basketball or baseball, you can be like, maybe it might be Baltimore this year. Oh my gosh, George Mason coming out of the woodworks. But like for golf, it's really anybody on any given day.
Sure, and in golf, okay, all these guys are great. All these guys on a tour are great, and they could have a good round. So you could end Thursday at any tournament, and you can have a surprise up top. Even Friday. But to do it 4 days in a row.
That's really hard.
That's where you separate the wheat from the chaff, and you have the great players and then the great players and the elite players. But we were talking about, is it too early to say somebody's a great player? Let me ask you about Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods was a great player.
Yes.
Would you put him in the top 3 of all time?
No. I think he's right on the outside of the party looking in.
But he was close.
Very close.
And some of the other things that happen but the injuries, especially in the back injury. So anything can happen that can derail a career. 3, 4, 5 years from now. Hopefully that doesn't happen for some of these top guys, but you never know. You don't think of golf as being grueling, but when you're playing 40 tournaments and you're doing all the walking and all the practice and all the keeping your body in shape, because it's not like us going to a 18-hole course in Milwaukee and playing around and going, oh boy, what a workout. But to do it at the level that these guys do it, it's not as easy on your body as you think.
Exactly, and I think that's one thing that people often forget when it's like, oh, you just play golf. Like, well, how good of shape could you actually be in? But you look at the elite players nowadays, and they are in phenomenal shape because of what you just mentioned. You're trying to not only extend your longevity, it's like, sure, you walk, you swing a club. Okay, you're not getting hit by a 400-pound lineman, but at the same time, there's still a lot that really goes into it at the end of the day. And I think this Masters is going to be very telling. I think the weather is going to clearly play a big factor in all of this. And I think we may not see a big 3, be another champion again this year, because the playing field might be a little bit more level because of the weather.
Sure.
All right, moving into the wide world of NFL football. One of our great correspondents on the Brew Sports Network is Gregg Schwartz, and he has done a phenomenal job helping us track down everything taking place in the football world. Gentlemen, before we get to Greg, the first big thing on the docket is Marshawn Lynch. The rumors that he did officially meet with Oakland today. And I want to just ask you guys before we get to Greg here in a moment, how much stock do you put in this? Do you think there's going to be a deal done? And if so, what does that mean for Oakland going forward?
I think there's going to be a deal done, but surprisingly, I don't know that it does much. And what I mean by that is I think Marshawn Lynch was a great back. I think he's still a serviceable back, but is he better than Murray, who they lost? So does it make them any better just because they replace Murray with Lynch? I still think the Raiders are a team that's going to contend. Obviously, the health of David Carr, I think, is more important than anybody they sign to be part of that backfield mix. But I think they'll get a deal done. I'm surprised. Maybe I shouldn't be, but I'm surprised Marshawn Lynch decided to come out of retirement. I was surprised when he retired, so I guess I shouldn't be surprised that he's coming out. But I think they'll do something. I don't know how much better it makes them than last year's Oakland Raiders team.
Yeah, it's hard to say that they're not going to really do anything with this meeting that they just had. But as I said, he's been out for the last season. It'll be hard to see if he can really be that impact player that the Raiders are looking for or need right away.
Right, exactly. So, well, let's bring in Gregg Schwartz here and get his thoughts about this. Gregg, a very good Wednesday to you, sir. We welcome you to the wonderful show that is Happy Hour here on Bruce Sports. How are we doing today, Gregg?
Very good. How are you?
Not too bad, sir. It's good to hear from you again. So the news, maybe for Raider fans, is exciting, maybe a little depressing if you're a Seahawks fan. But what do you make of this Marshawn Lynch meeting with the Raiders today? Do we put a lot of stock into it? Of course, Scott and Ryan here just giving us their thoughts. But what do you say about this Marshawn Lynch meeting today with the Raiders?
Okay, let's back up a minute, first of all. He's still property of the Seattle Seahawks, and they granted permission for Oakland to speak with him. So I think the first thing that's going to happen is it'll probably be a 7th round or 6th round pick. But if this all does come to fruition, there's probably going to be a trade made to make that happen, because he's not a free agent or he's still retired as far as the league is concerned. Once we get through all that minutia, this is going to happen. I don't think there's any doubt about it at this rate. I think that he does make I'm reluctant to say significant impact, but he's going to make a positive impact on their team, because Latavius Murray's gone. And, to even make a comparison to last year, I think is a little improper. The comparisons that need to be made are, is he better than Tywan Jones? Absolutely. Is he better than DeAndre Washington? Absolutely. So right there you have at worst, a steady running back in the backfield for Oakland to make them a contender. Absolutely.
When you look at this move overall, and I made this argument earlier today on Halftime, I really still don't think that this makes Oakland all of a sudden a Super Bowl team. And Tanner was fighting me tooth and nail for this, saying, how does it not? And you look at Marshawn, like, he hasn't touched a ball in 2 years. He's been practicing golf terribly. He's been eating Skittles, and he's been doing endorsement deals. He's not been working out in the gym. And Tanner was like, well, he's an athlete. He knows what it takes. If I just played a full career of football and then retired, I'm honestly probably not going to the gym very often. I'm probably going to let my body relax and rehab. I really don't think this is going to be the beast mode that, Seahawk fans, went to sleep dreaming about every night, being like, oh my gosh, I love Marshawn Lynch. It's not that guy. It's a 2-year removed Marshawn Lynch guy, and sure, he'll probably have a couple of those big runs, and fans will be like, he's back. It's not sustainable, though. Am I foolish for thinking that, Gregg?
Well, the other thing to throw out there is he's that magical 30 years old. Now, he does have a year plus of inactivity that in the Adrian Peterson mold might benefit him, as far as he hasn't taken the bumps and bruises for the last year and a half, 2 years. But you do make a valid point. Conditioning on your own, and I'm a very good representative of that, is far different than conditioning when it's supervised, especially in an NFL setting. So, certainly that's one of the things Oakland looked at is, did Ironhead Hayward show up today, or was it somebody more along the likes of a nonstop professional running back? So, nothing against Ironhead Hayward. He was pretty darn good for being a big boy, but the conditioning is going to be a big deal. But the thing, look at Oakland. They don't really need a game breaker at running back, because they do have a game breaker at quarterback. They do have a game breaker at wide receiver in Amari Cooper. So, they just need somebody that's going to make defenses honest and not sit back and zone all day long to take out the passing game.
Well, along those same lines, Gregg, how serious or how concerned should Raiders fans and people in the organization be in regards to Carr's injury? It sounds like he'll make a full recovery in time for significant parts of training camp, but is there any concern from the Raiders nation about David Carr?
I think so. I mean, you have that major an injury. I mean, it did cost them a run in the playoffs. I think they would have done quite well in the playoffs this past season with him. But, Raiders fans have a lot more on their minds right now as well, considering their time is limited. But as far as, concern of the quarterback, I mean, Matt McGloin isn't, necessarily the guy that I'm ready to go to if David Carr gets injured, or Derek Carr rather gets injured again. I do think he'll be ready for the season. I don't think there's any real question about that. How much reps he'll get early in preseason, who knows? But I think by the third game, which is what counts in the preseason anyway, he'll be ready to take the reins with no problem. But that specter of another injury is certainly out there.
Talking with Gregg Schwartz here on Happy Hour on Bruce Sports. That's Ryan. That's Scott. I'm Baxter. Looking at Marshawn Lynch's stats here. First of all, he's almost rushed for 1,000 yards just in the playoffs alone over his career. That's kind of impressive, honestly. But it's not like Marshawn Lynch is coming back because he, was 600 yards away from breaking a rushing record, or 17 touchdowns away from beating the all-time scorer. I mean, yes, he's had a good career, almost a little over 9,000 total rushing yards, 74 touchdowns, but I have a hard time getting behind this guy saying that, listen, he's going to come in immediately and be a game changer. Had he never retired and he was healthy the last 2 years, absolutely, but I struggle to get behind the fact that he's going to be that game changer that Oakland, I think, might think he is.
Yeah, but the other thing to consider, and Greg, I don't know what you think about this, is in Marshawn Lynch's mind, he was one carry that never happened away from a Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly.
So how much could that, eat away at you, knowing that you were on the precipice of winning a championship and it didn't happen?
And he's from Oakland, and they're leaving Oakland, so, I mean, there might be some emotional ties, too. This was his only chance to play for the hometown team. I think in his mind, he thinks has a lot left to give. In Oakland's mind, they need to be rational about, can you give us a steady run up the middle of the field? Can you help us move the chains on third and short? And that's really the proper way to look at it. Again, I go back to he's probably the best option compared to what they have on the roster right now. The draft is pretty fertile as far as running backs go, but again, you're talking about throwing a rookie in the backfield. It worked pretty well for two teams, the Cowboys and the Bears last year, but whether that's lightning in a bottle is another story. So yeah, if he thinks he's going to come in and rush for 1,500, 2,000 yards, all that silly talk from the past, more power to him. I think Oakland has to be more rational. Can we get 800 out of him?
Right, and I completely agree with you on that one. This isn't the guy you're giving the ball 25 to 30 times a game. Similar to that is a guy named Adrian Peterson, whose stock, similar to a quarterback like Jay Cutler, now that Tony Romo retired, has now gone up a little bit higher because fans are trying to now figure out, and teams are trying to figure out, okay, well, the pool to potentially sign players is now a little bit smaller. For Adrian Peterson, how does this affect him going forward? Do we see him start to vamp up talks a little bit more? Or does teams still continue to wait and pass on him until after the draft is over and then they kind of adjust? That's kind of what we've been hearing, at least locally with Green Bay, even though that the Packers likely will never make this move. However, knowing Ted Thompson, he'll likely go through the draft. If he doesn't get exactly what he wants, then maybe he might have at least one conversation with Adrian Peterson. But is there a clear favorite now to sign Adrian Peterson since Marshawn Lynch was really never on the market but now is probably off the market officially and Oakland is now gone from Adrian Peterson's radar?
I agree with you. I think Green Bay might be a very attractive market for him, but I don't think, barring the Oakland transaction with Marshawn Lynch, I don't think any running backs are going to sign until after the draft. And primarily because on the high end, the first and second rounds, it's a very deep running back draft, but they're also pretty prevalent throughout the lower rounds as well. Saying that, Adrian, if Lynch signs with Oakland, then yes, it's one more team that's off the market. You're talking then about Green Bay, maybe Buffalo to a degree. Minnesota keeps popping back up on my radar. I don't know how badly the bridges are burnt, but that's a team that really could use a stud running back. Whether AP is still that stud running back, I can't tell you at this point. Didn't look like it at the beginning of last year before he got hurt, but those are kind of the marketplaces. But I don't see anything happening until after the draft.
Well, and to that point, you talk about Minnesota. I think Minnesota was a little disappointed because I think they thought they had more depth behind Adrian Peterson.
Yes.
And I don't think those guys stepped up in a way that the management there thought they would. And I think that's making them maybe think, all right, if we can get him at a discount on the downside, maybe we re-sign him.
Well, let's not forget, too, that Latavius Murray is also a Minnesota Viking now
Absolutely.
this season. That's one thing. I mean, if you're looking for a possible stud to fill in for Adrian Peterson, Latavius Murray is not exactly a bad option.
No, but you need two nowadays, right? I mean, that's really the way it's built. You need two guys that you can rely on.
I agree with all of that. Baxter and I have talked before. I've had Jerick McKinnon on my fantasy team for the last few years, waiting for something to happen right along with the Vikings, and it just hasn't clicked for him. But yeah, with Latavius Murray, that I'm still not sold that he's the all-pro stud that a lot of people think he can become, but he's a very serviceable running back, and he's the best one on the Vikings roster. That's probably where AP is going to settle in best, is a team that needs either that second running back or, heaven forbid, somebody gets hurt in training camp, and he might be stuck waiting until training camp for something like that to happen.
Real quick here, Greg, before we let you run, Tony Romo announcing yesterday that he is officially retiring. Now he's signing with CBS to replace Phil Simms in the broadcast booth.
Thank God.
Your takeaways from that, obviously joy and excitement.
Well, because Phil Simms is out of the broadcast booth. I don't know Phil Simms personally. I bet he's a great guy, but very milquetoast when it comes to broadcasting. The concern I have, though, if we take it from that approach, is that one of the major networks is replacing their number one analyst with a guy who's never done it before. And right. I know Tony Romo has been he's eloquent, he's well-spoken, he does well in interviews. Whether he can do a nonstop color commentary is yet to be determined. And somebody made the comment recently that I was with that, Phil Simms has been doing it for 20-some years. And I said, yeah, and he still hasn't gotten it right. But the fact he's had that kind of practice, Tony Romo hasn't. As far as the whole that whole saga, and we've been over that several times on the various shows here on Bruce Sports, that I'm surprised that the way it's come to a conclusion, because I don't know if Tony Romo himself thinks that he's done playing football. And when the news started coming out about him taking a TV deal with whatever network, I still thought it was posturing. It wasn't until CBS actually announced the move that I was like, oh, wow, he actually jumped. So, I don't know if he's dabbling to see if he likes it, in which case I'm still don't feel comfortable about him being the number one analyst on, the game of the week on CBS. For him to say after a few games or one season that, this isn't for me, I'm going back to Houston. But as far as Phil Simms goes, I'm happy to see him go. And I know that's a terrible thought. But the one thing on that real quick, there are a lot of these broadcasters who the generations now that are really getting into football don't have a reference point for these guys. That, who remembers watching Phil Simms play for the Giants? Troy Aikman has.
Not me.
Yeah, there you go.
I do.
Scott does, yeah. Scott's our resident historian.
But, Troy Aikman has more of a reference point, and now Tony Romo and some of the. So I think that you're starting to see a shuffling. Chris Collinsworth, who remembers him other than covering the Olympics and whatnot. So I think that's where some of this is happening. So I am surprised that it's Tony Romo in that chair. I always thought it was going to be Peyton Manning, but it is what it is.
Along those same lines, though, I guess to make a reference for somebody my age, I don't remember John Madden coaching. I don't remember Pat Summerall playing. So I guess that's where we're at with a lot of these guys, too.
The next phase of it.
Sure. So I guess it pays to be a Cowboys quarterback because Aikman's the top guy for Fox, Romo. So when are we going to see Quincy Carter be the top guy somewhere? Like somewhere somebody's clamoring for a Cowboys quarterback.
Brandon
right?
Whedon or somebody can go work for NBC or somebody. Come on, guys. Or Drew
There you
Bledsoe.
go. Absolutely. I'm all for it.
All right, Greg. Well, we got to let you run, but we appreciate you swinging by Brew Sports today. Where can people find you on social media today?
On Twitter, I am at 3G_media. And on Facebook, GNSCHW.
Perfect, Greg. Thanks so much, sir. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
Yeah, you as well. There goes Gregg Schwartz here on Happy Hour as we continue to move along with the program. Great insight from him. Yeah, when you as a fellow broadcaster, nothing infuriates me more than when guys that work years and years to be in the booth get passed over now because one guy just happened to retire from said professional sport. It's very infuriating personally as someone that's trying to make their way through the broadcasting world, but I get the marketing side of it. I get the financial side of why they do it.
Yeah, and I understand the frustration because I see it too. It's something though that's never going to change, and more importantly, I'm okay with it if the guy ends up being good.
That's the big thing.
I'm still not okay with Charles Barkley doing what he does.
He's
I think
terrible.
he's terrible.
And that's not even to play on his terrible
Right.
business, but he really is terrible.
So I think if you vet these former players and they're good at it, ultimately I can live with it. But it's ones that are so brutal. It's like, okay, I get it. He's a name, but he's awful. Get him out of there.
Yeah, even looking at guys like on Sunday, on Fox on Sunday, I mean, Terry Bradshaw's getting to the end of his run there personally. Jimmy Johnson, too. I mean, those guys, look, it's great. They did a lot of good stuff back when they played and coached and whatever, but at some point you got to start making that transition, getting names in people actually know and have actually seen play or coach, too.
Bradshaw's starting to remind me of the NFL's version of Dick Vitale, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I get more upset when the former players take studio roles rather than in-game because I think studio takes a lot more training, a lot more schooling, and
gotta know
one
the cameras,
way,
the cues,
the different. It's more structured. But the end-game stuff, I think a player being color commentator fits a little bit more than studio because they're watching the game and then instantly talking about what just happened, and they can recognize that quicker, especially someone who is 1 year removed from or 1.5, depending on what you want to count as far as Tony Romo being gone. But there's just a quicker aspect of being in the booth during a game rather than in studio.
I actually enjoy, though, the former players that weren't elite. And what I mean by that is Aikman, he had a great team around him. He won some Super Bowls. Steve Young, all those guys. But I like seeing a perspective of players who had to struggle to be successful.
Right.
That had to go through some ups and downs because I think when teams are struggling and they're talking about that, it resonates more talking to a guy who was maybe a 500 quarterback than somebody who won 5 Super Bowls because he had a great team around him. How can you tell me what struggle is when this team's struggling on the field when you never had to play through that?
Right, exactly. I mean, if you got a guy in like you said, like a Troy Aikman, who yes, he had a little adversity, but I mean, he won a couple of Super Bowls. Probably is a Hall of Fame quarterback. Like when he's sitting out there trying to call, Browns Lions, and he's like, well, these two teams really just been struggling. It's like, Troy, how much do you really know about struggling? You've got a couple of rings. Detroit hasn't been there ever, and Cleveland doesn't even remember what the word Super Bowl is. Like,
right.
You
See,
can't relate to these guys.
Rich Gannon struggled.
Yes.
Like, he had some struggles, So when he's telling you, well, this team is probably going through this, and this is some of the stuff that's happening in the locker room, like, oh, that's probably some.
It makes so much more sense.
Real world, first person perspective there,
Exactly, and I think you're seeing even outside of the TV side of it, you're seeing a lot more guys from professional athletes getting pulled into the radio side of it, whether it be like studio hosts, like, oh, I'm doing whoever. I think like Brady Quinn and AJ Hawk had their own show for a while too, which was kind of funny because they're brother-in-laws. But you're pulling guys that have had success at the college level. I mean, Tim Tebow, very successful college college player, working for the SEC network when he's not playing baseball, but he's not being called up to the NFL, to be a broadcaster for any of the major networks.
Well, and I'm going to go one further on these former players taking broadcasting jobs. So I've heard across national radio, whether it be Fox, whether it be NBC, whether it be ESPN, they're bringing in former players to do general shows, not just football specific or baseball specific. And it actually started, to me, to get under my skin when Rod Dibble was teamed with Dan Patrick, and he would talk baseball. And when you get to anything else, like, I don't know anything. Well, then why are you on a show?
Yeah.
Like, why aren't you then just the baseball correspondent or the baseball expert? Why are you hosting a daily show or co-hosting a daily show when you openly admit to know nothing about anything but baseball?
Right, exactly.
I mean, those are the ones that really go on me. It's like, okay, Amani Toomer. Great, but he openly says, "Well, I don't care about baseball." Why are you on the show then, man? Like, if you can't talk about it, then take the season off.
Yeah.
Come back during football. Bring in somebody who can at least talk about things that are happening for the next 6 months, while you just sit there and, I don't know, tell jokes and try to be funny when you don't have anything to add to the show.
You're right. I mean, that's even something for myself that I still struggle with at times. Like, I don't know a lot about baseball. I mean, I should say I don't know a lot. I don't follow baseball or hockey or even basketball very closely, but I know enough of the ins and outs on the behind-the-scenes stuff that I can sit here, have a conversation, and say, well, yeah, this is a very good three-point shooting percentage, or this guy's ERA needs a lot of work because it's struggling from last year. Like, I can have that conversation, right. But if you want that historian that, has been following baseball like yourself for years, I mean, I will be the first one to leave the conversation, be like, you obviously know way more about that because I've lived and breathed other sports growing up.
Right, but you don't say, I don't care about that. And this is what these guys are doing.
Not consistently.
I'm like, okay, then why should I listen to you talk now for the next 2 hours?
Right, exactly. That is a big thing. People are like, well, click, I'm moving on to the next thing. And it's one thing to be openly public about it and another thing to actually just, think about it in your own mind, basically. Moving out of this and into the wide world of basketball, you look at the NBA right now, and there is a man that continues to stir headlines, and it is the one, the only Russell Westbrook. Mm-hmm. He tied Oscar Robertson's single-season triple-double record last night with 41 triple-doubles as the Thunder just curb-stomped the Milwaukee Bucks last night on national television. If there was ever a game that the Milwaukee Bucks needed to really come out and prove that they were a legitimate playoff contender, that certainly would have been the game. However, that we don't care about the Bucks at this exact moment. We care more about what Oscar Robertson and Russell Westbrook are doing. Obviously, Oscar Robertson, very successful career, played with Cincinnati way back in the day when they actually had a basketball team, and then finished his career with the Bucks. But you wanted to have this debate, Scott, about Russell Westbrook versus Oscar Robertson, and I have both their stats in front of me, and I want to hear your thought process behind these two gentlemen.
So there have been people over the last week and a half that I've had conversations with that have said, well, what Westbrook's doing doesn't matter as much. What Oscar's doing is more important. It's a greater task. And I said, well, tell me why. Tell me why his feat is greater than what Westbrook's doing. Well, all Westbrook does is chuck up a bunch of shots. I said, all right. So I pulled the stats, and I think when the season comes to an end, if Westbrook continues to shoot at the pace he's shooting, he'll have like 81 more shots than us. That's one shot a game. Mm-hmm. So his one shot more a game makes his stats not important as Oscar Robertson. The other thing is the team that's built around him. So Oklahoma City lost Durant. They lost Harden. They had a big three, and they were and probably could have been a title contender if those guys were there. You look at what's left on that team, and there's really not a lot. So not only is Westbrook able to score, he's able to get rebounds, so he's defending his position, even as an undersized player, defending his position. And the fact that he's able to get the assists, and the assists are the hardest part because you can't do anything to help this guy make the basket.
Yeah.
You put him in a position, but if he can't hit the shot, it doesn't matter. So you can fault him for shooting too much and scoring, but he's also obviously helping the rest of his team get better because he's setting them up to score as well.
He's helping a subpar team outside of him as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And he makes that team so much better. Without Russell Westbrook, you're talking about the Thunder being way deep in the bottom of the Western Conference.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm looking at both of these stats right now. If you want to make another argument for Westbrook, you could say, "Whoa, he's played, all the games, 3 times in his career. He's played every single, or 4 times in his career. He's played all, 82 games. He's an Iron Man." Oscar Robertson, never only played a couple of full seasons, a handful of times. But Oscar Robertson, at the end of the day, he's a Hall of Famer. He's a 12-time All-Star. He averages 25 points, throughout his entire career, 9.5 assists. This man knows what it's like to be successful at the highest level, but this is the debate I always have with so many people when you try to compare the people. You hear, for a while it was, Andrew Luck is the new Peyton Manning. It's like these guys played at different times in their primes in their career. LeBron James is the Michael Jordan. You hear that one way, way too much. And it just gets so frustrating because the game when Oscar Robertson was playing it is an absolute shell of what it is right now. Yes, you may have had more fundamentals back when Oscar Robertson was playing, but you don't have the Steph Currys doing behind-the-back passes and the deep three ball anymore. There wasn't a three-point line back in the day when Oscar Robertson was playing. So to say that Russell Westbrook is averaging this, if Russell Westbrook only had to shoot two-pointers, I don't think he's having the same amount of success that we're seeing when he steps outside the line and hits one from deep.
He's probably not having the points total. So his triple doubles would be 12 points, 14 points, whatever.
Right.
But here's the thing, and this makes fossils really mad. I'm an old man. Fossils get mad when I say this. The game is different. You give me any team from the 70s, you give me that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Bucks team, and you put them in the league now, and they get smoked.
100%.
Even though they're
Absolutely.
better fundamentally, they're not as athletic.
It's just
and
not
as
how the game is
gifted
anymore.
And as big and as strong. It's a whole different animal when you take those eras. And people, like, they love to look at stats and they romanticize about them. And I'm guilty of it too because I'm a baseball stats guy.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, it's like you're comparing apples to oranges. Even baseball players talk about these great players. They weren't facing – every baseball team now has guys – 2 or 3 guys that can throw in the upper 90s.
Yeah.
You didn't have that in the 70s.
No.
And so you can talk about how great the hitters were, but they weren't facing the meat grinders, and they weren't facing the specialized rotations where you had a 7th inning guy and an 8th inning guy and a 9th inning guy. They would just wait out the starter until they got tired in the 7th and 8th and then hit him around a little bit.
Yep.
That doesn't happen anymore.
Exactly.
So you're comparing different things in football, in basketball, in hockey. People just need to understand that we have evolved in the way we train and how much bigger and stronger we are as a species. It's not even close to being the same thing.
Yeah, you shouldn't try to discount what Russell Westbrook is doing right now just because it's not what you think Oscar Robertson did before. Just sit back and enjoy what is going on right now because this is a great player that you have the opportunity to watch in this era of basketball, and you should enjoy it. Don't discount it for anything that it isn't.
Absolutely, and I love Oscar. Don't get me wrong. I remember as a kid, at the end of his career, I saw the shell of what Oscar was because he was an older player, but great community guy, great guy, great career, deserving Hall of Famer. The problem is everybody thinks black and white in this world. So they hear me say that Westbrook's great, and they go, oh, so you hate Oscar. No, I don't hate. They're both great.
You respect them in their own eras.
Right. So let's think in shades of gray. They were both great players. They both were at the top of their games in the era they played. But let's not diminish the new era because we have some romanticized view of what the old school was.
Right, exactly. And how many times do you even hear the comparisons of whatever it was, I forget the year the Dolphins were undefeated, I don't know my spacing on them right now. 72 Dolphins. Yeah.
Oh my God! And I
they
can't
were undefeated.
stand those guys.
Like,
I can't stand them popping the champagne when
every year.
It makes me sick.
Same thing though. Like if you put the 72 Dolphins against even the Browns right now,
they don't win a game.
No, they get
They may
smoked.
win 2 games if they're lucky.
They get smoked every single day. That's just not realistic anymore because the game is progressively getting faster and faster every single year. Athletes are getting stronger, bigger, faster, all over the place. A couple of comments here on Facebook. Patrick says good afternoon to us. Good to see you, Patrick. Thanks for tuning in. Aaron says, I'm glad you gents care. Makes it more interesting. And he says that I hate baseball, apparently. Patrick says, Scott's talking about who has better feet. And then Aaron says, hashtag foot fetish. So apparently, I don't know if you have a foot fetish or not, Scott, talking about people's feet. But
I don't even remember talking about
I don't remember either. That's why when they're like, Scott's talking about who has better feet, I was like, when was this conversation?
I think I was talking about what a feat it was. So
that's see, there we go.
Funny guy.
So he has a feet fetish, not a foot fetish. Okay. Aaron also says, without Westbrook, Oklahoma City sucks. 100% agree with that. I mean, it really.
I mean, if we're talking about Oklahoma City, that sucks. The Thunder, they're decent with Russell Westbrook.
Well, yes, of course. The city itself, though, I mean, you can take it or leave it.
Well, you don't think they could be a playoff team with just Enes Kanter leading the way?
No, or, Serge Ibaka. No, it's not Serge Ibaka.
No, he's not Oladipo.
That's who it was, Victor Oladipo.
They got him.
Who was a young budding player at Orlando. I was very excited when he got drafted, but I've seen almost nothing from him.
Kind of fizzled out.
Yeah, and maybe he is learning from Westbrook, and maybe next season they'll be bigger and better, but I got asked the question earlier today if I thought Westbrook was going to finish his career at Oklahoma. And I have a hard time saying 100% yes on that. But at the same time, if Russell Westbrook, in 2 or 3 years still has never made it, to the NBA Finals or has never won, you have to think he's sitting there at home going, gosh, I am early 30s. I really want to go win a championship because I know I'm one of the best players still in the league probably at this point. I start, pushing my agent to go say, hey, maybe Golden State or maybe Boston or Cleveland would take me.
Oh, yeah, or whoever that team on
Exactly.
the cusp is at the time.
San Antonio or whoever.
I think it's a 50-50 shot because the one thing the Thunder can do is pay him more than
Always,
others.
yeah.
But if it comes down to it, I mean, he's got to be looking at it saying, hey, we had a window here. We had Durant, we had Harden, we had me. If we could have stayed together as we were just starting to continue to peak,
I can't
who
even
knows?
imagine what that team would be like currently.
Right.
That would be terrifying.
So he's probably looking at like, okay, are we ever going to get two players like that to complement me?
I really
No.
doubt it.
I
And that's
do
the
too.
thing, too, is Oklahoma going to go out in free agency this next year and try to bring in somebody to try to even be a half of what Russell Westbrook is? Maybe, but probably not. Not a lot of guys want to go to OKC to play basketball, even if Russ is your teammate.
And it gets difficult if you try to get that big free agent signing that doesn't end up working out. Then there's
Right.
some money that you could have given to Westbrook to keep him there. But I see him kind of pulling Dwayne Wade, staying there for majority of his career, and
Yeah.
then kind of towards the very end,
Dipping out.
yeah, join another team, see what he could do. Probably the Lakers, probably.
Why not?
Well, I'll tell you what. I rooted so hard for Oklahoma City though when they had those three because I wanted them because I don't like David Stern.
Because they were the new team.
Yeah, and I never liked David Stern. I don't mind Silver as much, but I didn't like Stern because he would outwardly say to people who I know aren't lying to me when they said he did not like small market basketball. I wanted Oklahoma City to just stick it to him. Here's your rating, Stern. You got this big three in Oklahoma City of all places. But obviously that didn't happen.
Right. Corey on Facebook says, I've been to OKC, not a fun city. I mean, that's half the battle right there. I mean, LA is entertaining. Chicago is entertaining. Miami even is entertaining outside of basketball. And then you obviously play the on-court stuff as well, too. Not a lot of guys are packing their bags saying, Oklahoma, time to go.
I've only been to Oklahoma City once. And it's probably not fair to compare when I went because it was about a year after the tragedy at the
bombing.
Yeah, the bombing.
Sure.
And it was a memorial, and we went to it. And I'm not kidding. There were probably 50 to 70 people surrounding this fence, this memorial, and you could hear a pin drop. So obviously, I didn't consider that a fun time.
Yeah.
But I've heard people say it's got some flair if you're into like sort of the Western theme. I'm not a country music guy. I'm not a Western
Same here.
guy. So I probably wouldn't enjoy a extended stay in Oklahoma City.
Right. And when you really look at it, I mean, yeah, you give him maybe 3 to 5 years max. He's 28 years old right now, and then he'll probably move on to greener pastures, like you both were saying. But it does beg the question in all of sports, though, and we hear this conversation every year come the end of the season of what makes a good MVP, who is an MVP, and they were breaking it down on some of the local radio stations here today, and you're hearing for football, you'll never have an MVP candidate not on a playoff team. You'll never, in the past, you would never see a baseball player win the Cy Young Award that wasn't on a winning team, but the trends are changing a little bit nowadays, but that's even the thing. Oklahoma City is still struggling. It's not like they're first in the West and Russell Westbrook is still dominating the league. This team is going to scrape their way into the playoffs, but what nowadays classifies a good MVP? I guess I don't even know anymore what it really breaks down to being.
If you were voting, though, just even currently, where it's been playoff teams that have won the MVP in basketball, but sometimes Kobe should have won and he didn't, or LeBron should have won and he didn't. You got to ask yourself, are you voting for the best player in the league, or are you voting for the team that's most valuable to his team, or are you voting for the player that's most valuable to a playoff team?
Right.
So there's really 3 criteria. You're right. Rarely is it going to be Robin Yount did it for the Brewers, but rarely is it going to be.
And how big of a surprise was that when that happened?
Right. But Ruben Sierra still can't get over it. But the thing is, you don't see a player who's the best player on a mediocre team, even though they'd probably be a 20-win team. Oklahoma City would be without Westbrook. So then you go to the next criteria: is he the best player on a team that's in the playoffs that they couldn't survive without him, or is he the best player overall? I still think, and I know people can say it's Curry, people can say it's Westbrook, and we don't have time to get into the debate because we only have a few minutes left, but I still think if you give me a guy for 3 years, not to start a franchise, But for 3 years, I'm taking LeBron
Yeah.
every time.
Every time.
But he's not going to win the MVP likely this year.
Yes, exactly.
So how do you really vet that out and figure out what criteria should be used? Because it seems from year to year to year, that criteria changes.
Yes, all the time.
It changes from either being the best player to what the name is, most valuable player. And I think you have to analyze what the team would be like without that player and kind of see the value, the literal value that this player has to the certain team. And I think he definitely is deserving because without Russell Westbrook, the Thunder, not
absolutely
good,
nothing.
not good.
Non-existent, and that was the big thing last year for Matt Ryan and the Falcons. You take away Matt Ryan and his success. Atlanta's got a great defense. They really do, but you take away Matt Ryan from the Falcons last year, I'd like to assume they're nowhere even close to the Super Bowl last year. So you talk about individual players. That was why, Tom Brady's always in the conversation. Aaron Rodgers is always in the conversation because the quarterbacks, at least in the NFL, are just this heralded thing. You literally have to rush for almost 3,000 yards as a running back to even be in the general conversation.
Sure. But I think in the Matt Ryan case, because, again, Rodgers, Brady, every year, but last year it was Matt Ryan's year, and even statistically, I think it wasn't until the last 3 games of the year where people went, do you realize how good his numbers are right now?
Yeah, exactly.
Because they kept talking about Brady sticking it to the league because he missed 4 games, and Rodgers having that resurgence after that rough start, But if you really look at how good Matt Ryan was, he was actually getting forgotten about. And then they're like, you know what? This is maybe more of a no-brainer than we thought. He's your MVP.
Right, exactly. And that's the big thing, too. I mean, you look at even Drew Brees, though. Drew Brees has led the league in passing yards. I know it's yards, not touchdowns, consistently for almost the last decade, almost. Like, he's been unbelievable with his passing yards. But Drew Brees is very rarely ever in that conversation just because his teams haven't been that great, and the touchdowns are also there to match that.
I think we can go one deeper next time we have a chance to talk about it. When you talk about greatest of all time, and I go, well, he can't be the greatest because he didn't win X amount of Super Bowls. It's like, okay, sometimes you can't control all of that.
Right.
But, you get into those conflicts, too, where, like Aaron Rodgers, how great can he be at the end if he's only got 1 Super Bowl win?
Exactly.
Even though I think statistically in the way he plays the game, he's better than Joe Montana, even though he hasn't won as much as Joe Montana. So be careful when people want to I understand Montana won Super Bowls, but I'm just saying if you were looking at prototypical quarterbacks, you're not taking Montana based on his intangible or based on his gradables. You're taking him on his intangibles.
Yeah, and then to go towards the baseball route, you look at Mike Trout, who's won the MVP twice. What have the Angels done in that span?
Hardly anything.
Yeah, not much.
That makes total sense to me. Yeah, that is really the big thing. I mean, certain sports, obviously, are classified differently, but when you got a guy even like Trout that's hitting the ball all over the park and being great,
Playing great defense,
but his team
well.
isn't, complimenting him, you still have to give it to the best individual.
Right, but it doesn't seem like baseball writers punish baseball players for not winning World Series, like football writers punish football players for not winning Super Bowls.
I think, the short answer, and I could be wrong about this, is that a World Series is harder to win than a Super Bowl.
Well, it's certainly more of a grind.
Right.
I mean, you have more opportunities to lose a World Series rather than you have to win a Super Bowl because it's only 1-game series in the playoffs. They're not even series. And then in the World Series, you got 3 rounds, and you got to win 12 games.
Yeah,
that's a good point. That is a very good point.
For a Super Bowl, if you get the bye, you only have to, what was that, 3 games? 3 games?
3 games.
Yeah,
3
games.
games.
If you get the bye, yeah. That's assuming you keep winning. Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, it's certainly...
But completely different sports, too.
Right, exactly, which is always the hard part to say that Mike Trout is more valuable than Matt Ryan is more valuable than Russell Westbrook.
Yeah. Right.
It's totally different. It really is. Well, gentlemen, this has been a lot of fun. I always appreciate when you guys stop by on Happy Hour. Thanks to Gregg Schwartz for swinging by the program earlier today as well to help us break down the potential move of Marshawn Lynch to the Oakland Raiders. That is certainly going to be a news story we're going to follow very closely here on Brew Sports, so make sure you keep it tuned to what we've got taking place. Coming up next on Brew Sports is College Road Trip with Barry Nelson and Ryan Thies. They've got a big announcement at the end of their show. You're not going to want to miss that. And, of course, they're going to put a nice big bow on the final championship that took place on Monday night between UNC and Gonzaga, and some other fun stuff as well, too. So make sure you tune in for that. That's coming up next here at 5 Central, 6 Eastern. For Scott Wisniewski and Ryan Thies, I'm Baxter Colburn. Thanks for watching Happy Hour. We'll see you guys back here tomorrow at 4 Central. Have a great rest of your day.